Millionaire took his mistress to buy a crib. His pregnant wife bought the entire baby brand. They say a secret can unravel even the tightest of bonds. In this story, that secret is a simple crib, purchase an errand so ordinary, yet laden with extraordinary betrayals. Daniel Harrington, a wealthy businessman with ties to celebrity circles, thought he could keep his double life in perfect balance. Little did he know a single shopping trip with his mistress would spark the ultimate backlash. His pregnant wife Sabrina, armed with determination and heartache, would respond in a way no one saw coming by buying the entire baby brand, brace yourselves, for a story of deceit, power plays, and karmic twists. Daniel Harrington was the kind of man who radiated confidence. Standing 6 feet tall with steely grey eyes and a neatly trimmed beard, he had always considered himself a self-made success story. Born in a modest home in Boston, Daniel built his empire from the ground up, beginning as an intern at a tech startup in his early 20s, and eventually starting his own software consulting company. His meteoric rise to wealth had been punctuated by headlines in local business magazines. Tech savant, Daniel Harrington, does it again. Fortune favors the bold. Daniel Harrington's startup explodes in value. In the well-heeled circles of New York City's Upper East Side, Daniel held a reputation that balanced professionalism with a hint of philanthropy. He had donated generously to local charities, including pediatric hospitals, to cultivate a polished public image. People knew him as a man who threw grand galas, invited Fortune 500 CEOs to his dinners, and once even attended an exclusive business conference hosted by Mark Cuban. Daniel was unstoppable. His personal life on the surface was just as impeccable. He had met Sabrina Lindstrom at a charity ball 5 years ago. Sabrina was the granddaughter of a Swedish real estate magnate, raised with both refinement and a keen sense of humility. She was a tall, elegant woman with warm brown eyes and an ever-present air of composure. Though her upbringing involved lavish estates in Stockholm and summer homes in Capri, Sabrina's heart was pure gold. She was known for her philanthropic work with children's hospitals, which had sparked Daniel's admiration from day one. They married at a chateau outside Paris, an event that made the society pages complete with fireworks over the Seine, and a guest list that included influential politicians and business icons. It was by all accounts a fairy tale union, and the press adored them. Sabrina, well-versed in public relations, handled Daniel's press engagements seamlessly, while Daniel continued to expand his ever-growing empire of tech solutions and digital ventures. In the earliest days of their marriage, Sabrina would watch her husband stand before a mirror in their penthouse suite overlooking Central Park and fix the collar of his suit. Daniel was ambitious, a trait she found both exhilarating and daunting. But Sabrina was no pushover. She was equally driven, albeit with a heart set on philanthropic endeavors rather than corporate boardrooms. For a while, it seemed like they complemented each other perfectly. The entrepreneur and the philanthropist, the power couple at the heart of New York's elite social scene. It was in their 3rd year of marriage that Sabrina became pregnant. The couple had struggled for nearly a year, consulting specialists and exploring fertility treatments. When Sabrina announced the positive test, Daniel beamed like a child on Christmas morning. The images from that day captured a side of him, not often seen in board meetings. Tender, emotional, and unmistakably invested in becoming a father. He brought Sabrina flowers every day for a week, and for a moment, it seemed as though they were on track to be the perfect family. However, life in the spotlight can be heavy with temptation. Daniel traveled extensively for business, often out of the country for weeks at a time, sealing deals in Dubai, Singapore, and London. Occasionally, Sabrina joined him. More often she stayed home, busy with her charitable work, and now caring for herself during pregnancy. The physical distance began to carve an emotional gulf between them. Late-night calls turned into perfunctory check-ins. Text messages went unread for hours or days. Sabrina, exhausted by her pregnancy, found herself drifting into a lonely routine, while Daniel found comfort in the buzz of new ventures and gatherings of wealthy associates. On the fringes of his glamorous world, certain names started to float into casual conversation, particularly that of a beautiful socialite named Clarissa Morgan. Clarissa had recently made headlines for her involvement in a minor film project in Hollywood, and her image was frequently splashed across tabloids. With her raven black hair, emerald green eyes, and a figure that demanded attention, Clarissa was a sensational presence. Rumors had it she was single again after a messy breakup with an art dealer in London. Somehow her path crossed with Daniel's at a technology event in Silicon Valley, where she was a spokesperson for a startup focusing on AI-driven marketing. At first, Clarissa was just another face in Daniel's wide network, but as weeks turned to months, discreet sightings of them together began to emerge. A private plane flight to a conference in San Francisco, a late-night dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant, just the two of them. The hush-hush chatter among the staff at Daniel's penthouse servants occasionally mentioned receiving phone calls from Ms. Morgan, though her name never appeared on any official appointment diaries or guest lists. For a man who had always prided himself on his self-control and devotion to Sabrina, it was a dangerous line to walk. Yet Daniel seemed unable or unwilling to resist Clarissa's allure. She was adventurous, spontaneous, and offered a thrill that tested the boundaries of his carefully cultivated image. If Sabrina represented stability and unwavering love, Clarissa symbolized excitement and the kind of spark Daniel feared he might be losing in his comfortable marriage. Like many men of power, Daniel believed he could keep both his wife and his mistress satisfied, carefully compartmentalizing each part of his life. But secrets like wildfires have a way of spreading, and once ignited, they can be nearly impossible to contain. The spark that would eventually set everything ablaze was ironically something as mundane as a baby crib, yet it was not the crib itself, but rather the circumstances surrounding its purchase that would bring Daniel's entire double life into peril and unleash a chain of events nobody could have predicted. Clarissa Morgan was the epitome of high society charm. She had a cutting wit, a knack for seduction, and the ability to read powerful men like an open book. She knew Daniel was married. Everyone in their circle did. But for Clarissa, the thrill of capturing a man who seemed otherwise unattainable was the ultimate sport. She played the game skillfully, never pushing Daniel too hard, always appearing a little out of reach and offering him glimpses into her world of glitz and spontaneity that made him feel alive. Daniel's attraction to Clarissa was both physical and psychological, where Sabrina was gentle and supportive. Clarissa was electric and demanding. She challenged him, fueled his ego, and sometimes, he would never say it aloud, made him feel more masculine than he had in a long time. His need for her became less about love and more about the rush, a drug to feed the emptiness he occasionally felt despite his success. Their affair began with clandestine dinners, hushed phone calls, and well-timed business trips. Initially, Daniel rationalized it. He was working hard supporting his pregnant wife, and if a bit of excitement on the side helped him cope with the constant pressure, what was the harm? He showered Clarissa with expensive gifts, jewelry from Tiffany's, a limited edition watch, and even a customized handbag with her initials. In return, Clarissa provided him an escape from the responsibilities that weighed heavily on his shoulders. Sabrina, meanwhile, was navigating the rocky waters of pregnancy alone. She was 4 months along, and while the morning sickness had finally begun to fade, the emotional turbulence was stronger than ever. Daniel's prolonged absences and distracted phone calls worried her. She reached out to her best friend, Marissa Faulkner, confiding that she felt something was off. Marissa, who was quick to jump to conclusions, insisted that Daniel might be straying an accusation Sabrina vehemently denied at first. But over time, the nagging doubts took root in Sabrina's mind. One evening, after calling Daniel repeatedly with no answer, Sabrina scrolled through social media. She came across a tagged photo of him, posted by a fellow entrepreneur at a rooftop lounge in San Francisco. Daniel looked happy, carefree, and suspiciously close to Clarissa Morgan. Although the angle was blurry and Clarissa's face was partially hidden, Sabrina recognized her from tabloids. Her heart sank, but she forced herself to remain calm. Perhaps it was an innocent encounter. Daniel often met colleagues and potential investors for late-night drinks. But the more Sabrina tried to rationalize, the more the doubt grew. She decided not to confront Daniel immediately, hoping to find concrete evidence or a clear sign that she was simply overreacting. For weeks, she kept her suspicions locked away, focusing on her prenatal health and philanthropic projects. She spent time visiting children in hospitals and organizing a charity art auction. During these visits, Sabrina couldn't help but imagine what it would be like to have her own child. The excitement of motherhood offered a temporary balm to her worries about Daniel. Meanwhile, Daniel was drifting further into Clarissa's orbit. Their affair was now an open secret among the staff of Daniel's penthouse and his business associates, though no one dared to tell Sabrina directly. Clarissa herself had grown comfortable in her role. She had bragged to a close friend, the aspiring actress Jade Billings, that she had never felt more powerful than she did on Daniel's arm. She enjoyed the hushed deference of Daniel's employees, the way she could snap her fingers and have a private jet ready for a weekend getaway. It was an arrangement that suited her well. All the while, the tension in Daniel's life was escalating. His software consulting company had landed a massive contract with a government entity, which demanded more oversight and a squeaky clean image. He needed Sabrina by his side for public relations. She was the perfect partner for presenting a united front at press conferences and charity events, yet he also craved Clarissa, whose allure promised a break from the endless negotiations and corporate scrutiny. It became a precarious balancing act. Each time Sabrina asked about his whereabouts, Daniel concocted another half-truth. Each time Clarissa batted her eyelashes, he reminded himself that one slip-up could destroy everything. And yet, like a moth to a flame, he could not pull away. The turning point came during a conversation with an old friend, Henry Caldwell, who had known Daniel from their early days in Boston. Over dinner at an upscale Manhattan restaurant, Henry noticed Daniel's anxious demeanor. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," Henry said. "Any trouble at home?" Daniel forced a laugh. "You worry too much?" "Henry, I'm just under pressure with these new deals." "Henry." A savvy observer gave Daniel a skeptical glance. "You know I've got your back, but be careful. The higher you climb, the harder the fall if you slip." Henry's words reverberated in Daniel's mind. Still, Daniel assumed he could handle it. Men of power often share one common flaw. They think they are indestructible, immune to the normal moral consequences that bind everyone else. He had no idea that Sabrina was quietly gathering her own puzzle pieces, and that Clarissa's ambitions were slowly growing beyond just weekend getaways. Everything was inching toward a climax, and it was only a matter of time before the carefully spun web of lies collapsed under its own weight. A month later, Sabrina found herself in an ultrasound exam room, staring at the black and white image of a tiny life flickering on the screen. She was just over 20 weeks pregnant, and the baby's heartbeat sounded strong. Though she smiled at the technician, her heart felt heavy. Daniel had promised to be here. Instead, he texted her moments before the appointment, saying he had a critical meeting with a government representative about the new contract. Sabrina tried to focus on the miracle taking shape inside her. She listened to the steady thump-thump of her baby's heart and imagined the life that awaited them. Yet the absence of her husband cut into her joy like a cold blade. She politely thanked the doctor, collected the ultrasound pictures, and left the clinic with a mixture of love for her baby and growing resentment toward Daniel. Driving home, she recalled how Daniel once insisted on attending every appointment, every birthing class. But now, as success enveloped him, and possibly something else, his promises evaporated. Sabrina's frustration escalated into a quiet resolve. She needed to uncover the truth. The doubt and anxiety that had been gnawing at her demanded resolution. At home, Sabrina's first step was discreet. She checked phone records. While she couldn't intercept Daniel's private calls, she noticed a repeated number from Redwood City, California, that frequently appeared at odd hours. Suspecting it was Clarissa, Sabrina decided she wouldn't confront him directly about it yet. Instead, she spoke to a private investigator, a middle-aged woman named Alexis Cruz, recommended by a friend who had used her services in a similar situation. Alexis's approach was systematic and professional. She began following Daniel during his business trips, tailing him from hotels to restaurants. It didn't take long for Alexis to confirm Sabrina's suspicions. Daniel and Clarissa were photographed entering a penthouse suite at the Four Seasons in San Francisco. They were seen dining together, laughing intimately, and even making purchases at luxurious boutiques. The final straw was a series of photos showing Daniel and Clarissa stepping into a high-end baby store. Downtown, Clarissa's hand lingered on Daniel's arm, and the store clerk later reported they were looking at cribs and nursery decor. When Alexis presented the photos to Sabrina, her hands shook, and she felt a wave of nausea that wasn't just from the pregnancy. For a moment, she debated confronting Daniel with the evidence. The heartbreak was searing her husband. The father of her unborn child was brazenly shopping for nursery items with another woman. The betrayal cut deeper than she had imagined. But Sabrina was not just any woman scorned. She was a strategist in her own right. She recognized the scenario. Clarissa was trying to weave herself into Daniel's life on a level that overshadowed even Sabrina's pregnancy. Clarissa wanted to be significant enough to Daniel that he'd willingly walk into a baby store with her, a store that by all rights Sabrina should have been visiting with him. Sabrina's sorrow soon twisted into anger, and then into something like cold determination. I'm going to make sure he knows exactly who he married, Sabrina told Alexis. And when I'm finished, they'll both regret this. That very day, Sabrina set two major plans into motion. First, she devised a way to corner Daniel into revealing his own deceit, using the one thing he valued above all else, his reputation in high society and in the business world. Secondly, she contacted an investment broker friend, Melissa Chan, who specialized in acquiring businesses. Sabrina had an unconventional idea, something that, if executed correctly, would send a message not just to Daniel, but to everyone watching. As Sabrina kept her composure, Daniel remained oblivious at home. He noticed she was quieter, more distant, but assumed it was merely pregnancy hormones. He even felt a twinge of guilt. The baby was due in a few months, and he knew he should be more present. But Clarissa's demands were growing, and she had entangled herself in his emotional fabric. She was planning a lavish birthday bash in St. Bart's and insisted he join her, promising they'd keep it strictly off the radar. Torn between the guilt of leaving a pregnant Sabrina and the pull of Clarissa's invitation, Daniel vacillated. In the end, his fascination with Clarissa won out. He told Sabrina he had an urgent meeting with new investors in the Caribbean. The lie tasted bitter in his mouth, but he convinced himself it was necessary. This business was too big to pass up. He said Sabrina listened to his words without contradiction. She simply nodded and pretended to believe him. She had grown far beyond anger. Now she was in full strategic mode. Each of Daniel's lies became another brick in the foundation of her plan. Before he left, Sabrina set a small gift on his suitcase. A silver rattle for the baby. She forced a sweet smile. "Don't forget why we're here. Daniel, come back to me safe," she said, her voice controlled and steady. Daniel kissed her on the forehead, muttered something about missing her, and hurried out the door. Sabrina watched him go with a mix of sadness and anticipation, certain that the stage was now set. She had no intention of letting Daniel's betrayal remain hidden for long, and she was about to prove that heartbreak, when wielded by someone with intelligence and resources, could transform into a powerful catalyst for revenge. The baby store that Daniel and Clarissa visited in San Francisco was part of a small but prestigious chain known as Cradle and Crown. It catered to affluent parents, offering handcrafted cribs, silk bedding designer strollers, and custom nursery artwork. The flagship location featured private shopping suites, crystal chandeliers, and personal shoppers who fawned over high-profile clients. Sabrina first heard of Cradle and Crown when Alexis showed her the investigator's photographs. In one shot, Clarissa was perched on the edge of a display crib, her lips curved in a triumphant smile, while Daniel stood behind her, looking at brochures for premium nursery packages. Something about that image sparked Sabrina's fury. It wasn't enough that Daniel was cheating. He was also stepping into Sabrina's territory as an expectant mother, tarnishing something sacred. Sabrina's unborn child deserved better than a father who would shop for cribs with a mistress. As weeks passed, Sabrina's pregnancy advanced into its 6th month, and she started making her moves in silence. Through Melissa Chan, she arranged discreet meetings with the Cradle and Crown brand's owners, an older couple named Howard and Bianca Stevenson. They were initially hesitant about selling, as Cradle and Crown was their life's work. However, Sabrina had a way of presenting her offer that was too tempting to refuse. She came prepared with detailed market analyses, expansion plans, and a promise to preserve the brand's artisanal essence. On top of that, she brought in personal stories of philanthropic initiatives that benefited families and children's health. Within weeks, the Stevensons agreed to the sale. The acquisition papers were signed in a private room at a luxury hotel in Manhattan. Sabrina insisted on absolute secrecy. No press releases, no public statements. The brand's name would remain unchanged, and from the outside, Cradle and Crown would look as if it had the same owners. But quietly, Sabrina became the majority shareholder and effective CEO. Daniel remained in the dark, busy with his government contracts and juggling. Clarissa's demands, he paid little attention to Sabrina's newfound hobby. If he noticed her frequent phone calls and meetings, he assumed they were related to her charity work or the occasional real estate investments Sabrina had dabbled in thanks to her Swedish family connections. He had no reason to suspect his wife had purchased an entire baby products brand, least of all the very one in which he and Clarissa had been picking out a crib. The day Daniel and Clarissa decided to finalize their crib purchase, Sabrina orchestrated a scenario that would unravel everything. Clarissa, feeling increasingly smug about her hold on Daniel, proposed they buy the most extravagant crib from Cradle and Crown. She wanted a statement piece, something that symbolized her place in Daniel's future. Although Daniel felt a twinge of guilt, he accompanied Clarissa to the store. What neither of them expected was the VIP treatment they received upon arrival. A store manager, fully aware of the recent change in ownership, offered them the private shopping suite. Lavish hors d'oeuvres, sparkling water, and soft music set the stage for what Clarissa assumed would be a romantic moment. She draped herself across the plush seating area, beckoning Daniel to her side. The manager offered them champagne, which Clarissa accepted, giggling about how it felt so decadent to shop for a crib this way. As they examined the custom crib designs, the manager discreetly left the room. Moments later, Sabrina walked in. She was elegant in a fitted maternity dress, her baby bump now undeniable. For a moment, Clarissa froze her eyes, darting from Sabrina to Daniel, the glass of champagne trembling in her hand. Daniel's face drained of color, his heart plunging into his stomach. Sabrina met his gaze, her expression devoid of the anger one might expect. Instead, she radiated a poised, almost regal calm. "I see you're making plans," Sabrina said, the slightest tremor betraying her controlled anger. "Funny, I thought we'd do this together." Clarissa attempted to regain her composure, crossing her legs and offering a small laugh. We were just looking," she stammered. Her bravado faltered under Sabrina's direct stare. Daniel attempted to speak, but words failed him. He had never seen Sabrina so composed, yet so chillingly determined. He tried to reach for her hand. She stepped back, shaking her head lightly. "Don't," she whispered. "You've said enough without words." Before Clarissa could conjure another excuse, Sabrina dropped the bombshell. "Whatever crib you two decide on will ultimately be your choice. After all, Cradle and Crown belongs to me now. Every piece of furniture, every design, every store location, it's all under my ownership." The shock in Daniel's eyes was palpable. His lips parted, but nothing came out. Clarissa stared, disbelief flickering across her face. Sabrina continued in a measured tone, explaining how she had quietly acquired the brand, the negotiations and the discreet signing. Her calm veneer cracked just slightly when she spoke of Daniel's betrayal. "You thought you could shop for a crib with another woman while I carried our child. Fine. But understand that you have no power here anymore." She looked at Clarissa, who seemed frozen to her seat, and added, "By all means, pick out whatever you like. But don't forget that every last dime of this purchase goes to my pocket and eventually to my child's future." The moment was as excruciating as it was cathartic. Clarissa finally found her voice, laced with indignation. "You can't just," Sabrina cut her off. "I can and I have. But you're free to go. No one is forcing you to stay, unable to withstand the tension." Clarissa stood, muttering a swift apology, and fled the suite in a flurry of embarrassment. Daniel, torn between shame and disbelief, tried to apologize, stammering about how he never intended for this to happen. Sabrina looked at him with an intensity that pinned him to the spot. "I'm not interested in what you intended," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. "I'm interested in what you've done and what this means for our child." The store fell silent, except for the soft hum of the overhead lighting. When Sabrina finally turned to leave, Daniel could only stand there, powerless and paralyzed. He had never imagined a scenario where his transgressions would lead to such a dramatic power shift. The crippling realization of his mistake hung in the air, and for the first time in his life, Daniel Harrington felt the full weight of his own hubris. In the aftermath of that explosive confrontation, Daniel was left to grapple with the unraveling of his private life. Word traveled fast among the employees at Cradle and Crown, filtering out to the closed-lipped circles of Manhattan's elite. Within 48 hours, whispered rumors circulated at high-end cocktail parties. Did you hear Daniel Harrington's wife bought the entire baby brand and caught him there? With his mistress? Daniel tried to manage the fallout with the same PR tactics he used in business crises. He arranged a meeting with his publicist and legal team, hoping to keep the scandal contained. But damage control became almost impossible once tabloids got wind of the situation, fueled by an anonymous tip from someone presumably in Clarissa's circle. Daniel had once been the golden boy of the tech world, but now every headline was a variation of Millionaire's extravagant affair, exposed by pregnant wife's swift business move. Sabrina, meanwhile, refused to hide. She had spent years being a gracious partner, the philanthropic half of a power couple. Now she was the betrayed wife turned formidable entrepreneur. She received calls from news outlets wanting her statement, but she declined interviews, choosing instead to issue a short, dignified announcement. Cradle & Crown has been acquired with the intention of continuing its legacy of excellence. Any speculation regarding my personal life is just that speculation. My priority is, and always will be, the well-being of my family. The business world reacted with a mix of awe and caution. Some commended Sabrina for her savvy move and unwavering composure. Others whispered behind closed doors that this spelled doom for Daniel's once impeccable brand. Even government officials overseeing his new contract expressed concern about how personal scandals might reflect on Daniel's professional reliability. For Clarissa, the sudden exposure was humiliating. She retreated from the public eye, cancelling her upcoming birthday bash in St. Bart's and avoiding paparazzi who were desperate for a quote. She wrote Daniel a series of frantic text messages, oscillating between fury at being humiliated and pleas for him to protect her from the tabloid onslaught. Despite her glamorous aspirations, Clarissa despised being known merely as the other woman. She had aimed to ascend through social circles with Daniel by her side, but now her reputation was tarnished. Amid the chaos, Daniel had no choice but to confront Sabrina face to face. He found her in the nursery of their penthouse, studying color swatches for the walls. The place looked surprisingly spare. No crib, no baby decorations, nothing but painted samples and a few furniture catalogues. She was alone, a hand on her growing belly, lost in thought. When she glanced up, her expression was stoic, guarded by layers of hurt. "Can we talk?" Daniel asked quietly. Sabrina nodded but kept her distance. Her posture was rigid, as though bracing herself for impact. Daniel's voice trembled as he began. "I'm sorry. There's no excuse. I got caught up in something. I didn't know how to stop. I was stupid and selfish." He paused, searching her eyes for any flicker of forgiveness. "I know an apology isn't enough, but I am sorry." For a moment, Sabrina seemed on the verge of tears. Her voice, however, remained measured. "You humiliated me. In public, in private. Worst of all, you risked our family's future for a cheap thrill." He tried to approach, but she stepped back. "I understand if you hate me," he said, his own eyes moist. "I deserve it," Sabrina inhaled a shaky breath. "I don't hate you, but I don't know if I can trust you. Every time I close my eyes, I see you in that store with her. Do you know how that feels?" A tear finally slid down Daniel's cheek. He had spent his life avoiding vulnerability. Yet here he was, laid bare by his own actions. "I know I've ruined everything. Just tell me how I can make this right." Sabrina said nothing at first. She turned away, resting a hand on the near-empty crib catalogue. When she finally spoke, her voice was clear, her words decisive. "You can't make it right overnight. I'm not even sure if we can repair this at all, but I'm carrying our child, and he or she deserves a father who shows up. So for now, We navigate this carefully. You focus on the baby, and so will I. We'll see what happens." Daniel nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. He knew this was the best he could hope for at the moment, a chance to stay in Sabrina's orbit, to prove himself, however slim that chance might be. In the days that followed, the tension in the penthouse was tangible. Daniel moved his belongings into the guest suite, an unspoken agreement that he would keep his distance until Sabrina decided otherwise. He spent his free time researching child development, attending prenatal classes alone, and consulting with marriage counselors. Meanwhile, Sabrina remained outwardly composed, but at night she wrestled with heartbreak and anger. She found fleeting comfort in feeling the baby's kicks, reminding her that amidst all the turmoil, a new life was on its way. And so the couple lived under one roof, barely speaking beyond what was necessary to coordinate doctors' appointments. Their once glamorous world was now a minefield of paparazzi business dilemmas and unresolved emotional wounds. Yet even in the darkest moments, Sabrina felt a strange sense of empowerment. She had taken control of her narrative, reclaiming a shred of dignity by outmaneuvering the mistress. If Daniel wanted to make amends, he would have to traverse a path of accountability and humility like never before. News of Daniel's affair and the subsequent baby brand buyout didn't vanish overnight. In fact, it gained traction, fueled by talk shows and tabloids eager to spin sensational theories. Was Sabrina's move a callous exercise of power? Would Daniel attempt to save face by stepping down from his company? Would Clarissa resurface in a tell-all interview? The scandal had real business ramifications. Stocks for Daniel's company. Harrington Tech Solutions wavered, reflecting a dip in investor confidence. Government officials scrutinized him more closely, hinting that any negative press might jeopardize the integrity of their contract. High-level partners, once eager to jump on board, his ventures became suddenly cautious. Despite the building pressure, Daniel refused to retreat entirely. He believed he could rectify the situation if he worked hard enough. Mornings found him in a whirlwind of crisis meetings with PR teams and attorneys. Afternoons were devoted to fulfilling obligations on the government contract, a Herculean task under the watchful eyes of potential critics. By evening, he returned to the penthouse, greeted by silence. Sabrina kept to her private quarters, interacting with him only for baby-related matters, or if mutual appearances were unavoidable. During one such evening, Daniel found Sabrina standing in the penthouse library, flipping through a family photo album. Pictures of their wedding in Paris, her in a billowing white gown. Him looking dapper in a tailored suit, contrasted sharply with the reality they now faced. Daniel approached cautiously. "We looked happy." Then he ventured, breaking the silence. She closed the album and set it aside. "We were," she replied flatly. "But a lot has changed." A heavy pause lingered. Daniel wanted to say, he missed her, missed them, but the words felt hollow. Eventually, Sabrina excused herself, leaving the album behind like a testament to what they had lost. Daniel sank into a chair, staring at the photos in disbelief. How had he let everything slip away? He yearned to find a reset button to undo all the damage, yet he knew such magic did not exist. Meanwhile, Clarissa's life was in a tailspin of its own. She had lost her comfortable arrangement with Daniel and was inundated with media requests. Paparazzi tailed her every move, hoping to snap a photo or elicit a scandalous soundbite. The hush money Daniel's lawyers offered was substantial, but Clarissa had to measure it against the allure of selling her story to a celebrity magazine. In a twist of irony, Clarissa discovered that the moment she became the other woman, many of her high society friends distanced themselves to avoid guilt by association. Invitations dried up. Sponsors pulled out of her small film projects. She found herself more alone than ever, left with the realization that her glamorous world was built on precarious social ties. Simultaneously, Sabrina thrived in her new role at Cradle and Crown. As a majority shareholder, she initiated expansions that aligned with her philanthropic goals, implementing special lines for charities and pushing for partnerships with children's hospitals. She also used her connections to create exclusive, high-end collaborations with European designers. The brand's revenues grew steadily, and Sabrina funneled portions of the profits toward pediatric care initiatives and maternity health programs. Late one afternoon, Sabrina found herself in a meeting with Howard and Bianca Stevenson, former owners of Cradle and Crown, to discuss updates. Howard, a kindly grandfather figure, turned to Sabrina with gentle curiosity. "My dear, it seems you've invested a lot of heart into this venture," he said. "Is there a personal reason driving you beyond what everyone's saying in the tabloids?" Sabrina paused, her eyes flickering with a mix of hurt and determination. "My child," she said softly, "I want to build something that secures a bright future for him or her." And her voice caught for a moment. "I refuse to let that future be tainted by betrayal. Cradle and Crown is in a way my declaration that I'm stronger than that." Howard and Bianca exchanged empathetic glances. Bianca reached out and patted Sabrina's hand. "We believe in you, Sabrina. Whatever your reasons, the brand is in good hands." At home, Sabrina's growing success only magnified the chasm between her and Daniel. He struggled to reconcile the wife he once knew, soft-spoken philanthropic content, to remain in the background with this formidable new force who commanded boardrooms and overshadowed his power moves. On more than one occasion, Daniel's business peers commented on Sabrina's brilliance, some even joking that she was the real Harrington star nowadays. As painful as it was for Daniel, a part of him swelled with pride at her achievements. If only he could share in that pride without the lingering ghost of his betrayal. In fleeting moments, Sabrina allowed a glimpse of her emotional turmoil to surface. She would cradle her baby bump at night, tears wetting her pillow as she felt the baby move. Sometimes she questioned if she was doing the right thing by keeping Daniel at arm's length, especially now that they would soon become parents. Other times, she resolved that her boundaries were necessary for her own dignity. Daniel had to earn his place again, if that was even possible. And so the household existed in a fragile equilibrium, neither fully together nor entirely broken. With each passing day, the weight of consequences bore down on them all. Sabrina used her entrepreneurial success to cope, while Daniel confronted the wreckage of his once untouchable reputation. Their future remained uncertain, tethered by the life growing within Sabrina. A silent question lingered in every interaction. Could love and trust ever be restored after such a public betrayal? Or would their story become a cautionary tale for anyone who believed power could shield them from moral reckoning? A tipping point arrived 3 weeks before Sabrina's due date. Daniel's business was already wobbling, but a leaked government audit report sent everything into a downward spiral. Although the audit found no direct evidence of fraud, it raised questions about Daniel's leadership amid personal scandals. Investors panicked, and Harrington Tech Solutions stock value plummeted nearly 20% overnight. Daniel spent hours in emergency board meetings, phone pressed to his ear as he negotiated with panicked shareholders. By the time he returned to the penthouse late that evening, he was greeted by an unexpected sight. Sabrina seated on the couch, hands folded over her baby bump eyes, blazing with determination. "I'm calling a family council," she said. Her voice held a quiet authority that left no room for debate. Family council was a concept they had picked up from one of Sabrina's Swedish relatives, a tradition where the family gathered to address crises in a structured manner. Daniel was too exhausted to argue. He slumped onto the armchair across from her, bracing himself for whatever was coming. Sabrina began. "You've brought us to the brink. Your reputation is in tatters, and now your company is suffering too. This impacts our child's future, and I won't stand by and let it ruin everything." Daniel's voice was hollow. "I know I'm trying to fix it. The board wants me to step down temporarily to show good faith." She studied him for a moment, perhaps gauging how sincere he was. "Do you think that's the right move?" He exhaled shakily. "Yes. If I step down, maybe the company can stabilize. Maybe the contract won't be in jeopardy. But part of me feels like I'm failing, like I built this empire, and now I'm letting it slip away." Sabrina pressed her lips together. "You let something else slip away, long before this, our marriage, your integrity. Now you're dealing with the consequences." Daniel winced. Her words stung, but they were true. He closed his eyes briefly, summoning the courage to speak. "Sabrina, I know you have every reason to hate me, but I still love you. I'm sorry that my actions have caused you so much pain. I want to do right by you and our child. I'll do anything." She looked at him, sadness mingling with anger. "Love isn't a magic word that fixes everything, Daniel. We have to decide what kind of parents we want to be. Our child deserves honesty, stability, and respect. Right now, we're falling short on all counts." He couldn't meet her gaze. "So what do we do?" Sabrina inhaled, drawing strength from the life inside her. "You step down from the company. Do what's necessary to salvage your reputation. You get therapy counseling. Whatever it takes to prove to me that you can be trusted again. In the meantime, I'm focusing on cradle and crown and preparing for this baby. If we're going to co-parent, we need to be on the same page." Her ultimatum hovered in the air. Daniel nodded, tears threatening to escape. He whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for at least giving me a path forward." That night, Daniel formally announced his temporary resignation to the board, citing personal reasons. The news sent shockwaves through the corporate world. Some critics crowed that Daniel's downfall was inevitable, while others admired his willingness to step back to address his personal issues. Clarissa, who had been in sporadic contact, saw this as an opportunity to gain his ear. She left him a voicemail. "I know you're going through a lot. Please let me be there for you. You matter to me." But Daniel did not reply. In the midst of chaos, he realized with stark clarity that Clarissa offered no solace, only a reminder of his worst mistakes. For the first time in months, Daniel tried to find genuine redemption. He started attending individual therapy sessions to confront the deeper reasons behind his affair. His fear of losing excitement, the sense of entitlement that came with success, the craving for an ego boost. He also booked appointments with a couples therapist, though Sabrina was hesitant to attend. She was not sure if she wanted to salvage the marriage or simply manage an amicable co-parenting relationship. Still, for the baby's sake, she agreed to try at least a few sessions. As Sabrina's due date approached, she experienced increased fatigue and anxiety. Publicly, she remained the poised entrepreneur, unveiling a new charity partnership with Cradle and Crown that provided free bassinets to financially struggling single mothers. Privately, she wrestled with questions of whether she should allow Daniel into the delivery room. She hated him for what he did, but she also understood that he was the baby's father. In the last therapy session before her due date, Sabrina voiced her deepest fears. What if I can't ever trust him again? What if the baby grows up sensing that tension, that resentment? The therapist offered gentle insights, explaining that healing was a process requiring time, remorse, and genuine change from Daniel. Ultimately, only Sabrina could decide if she was willing to see who Daniel became in his pursuit of redemption. That night, Daniel approached Sabrina in the hallway outside her bedroom. His eyes brimmed with remorse. "I know I've lost the right to expect your forgiveness," he said, "but I want to be there for the birth. Please let me be a father from day one." Sabrina's expression softened slightly. "I'll think about it," she replied gently, rubbing her belly as if seeking counsel from the life inside her. There was no immediate yes or no, only a fragile promise to consider his request. And so, on the cusp of new life, they hovered between heartbreak and hope. The tension in the penthouse remained taut, but now it held a faint glimmer of possibility. Beneath the aftermath of Daniel's crash lay the first signs of an awakening, a realization that if they were to move forward, they would have to confront their worst selves and perhaps discover their better ones in the process. The day arrived in a swirl of nerves and anticipation. Sabrina woke up before dawn with mild contractions. Initially, she tried to manage them alone, pacing around her bedroom, but by morning, the pains intensified. She called out for Daniel, who rushed to her side. For the first time in months, their eyes met with a shared urgency that eclipsed their personal tensions. The baby was coming. They arrived at the hospital in a flurry of medical protocols and forms. Sabrina was whisked into a private suite, courtesy of the hospital wing she and Daniel had donated to in earlier, happier times. Nurses checked her vitals, monitored the baby, and administered pain relief. Throughout it all, Daniel was there, holding her hand, fetching ice chips, whispering reassurances. Despite her lingering resentment, Sabrina found herself oddly comforted by his presence. He was still the father of her child, after all. Hours passed. Contractions ebbed and flowed, and medical staff prepared for delivery. In a brief lull, Sabrina looked at Daniel, sweat dotting her brow. "I'm allowing you here because of the baby," she said, through clenched teeth, struggling against a fresh wave of pain. "Don't take it as a sign that I've forgiven you." He nodded solemnly, wiping her forehead with a damp cloth. "I understand. Thank you for giving me this chance." When it was finally time to push, Sabrina dug deep into her reserves of strength. Her emotions soared between exhilaration and fear. Through the haze of pain and elation, she felt Daniel's supportive grip on her arm. She heard the frantic encouragement of nurses and doctors, felt the swirl of adrenaline as the baby crowned. Then a single sharp cry pierced the air. A wave of relief washed over Sabrina as the doctor lifted a tiny wriggling form into view. A baby girl, pink and perfect. Her cries announcing her arrival with unabashed vigor. Sabrina burst into tears, overwhelmed by the miracle of new life. Beside her, Daniel stared at his daughter in awe, tears streaming freely down his face. "You have a baby girl," the doctor announced, placing the infant on Sabrina's chest for skin-to-skin contact. Sabrina felt her heart swell with a love so powerful, it momentarily blotted out every betrayal. She held her daughter close, marveling at the tiny fingers, the soft tufts of hair, the way the baby's squinted eyes struggled to adjust to the bright world. Daniel leaned in his voice, trembling as he said, "She's perfect. She's absolutely perfect." Gently, he brushed his daughter's cheek with his fingertip, a profound reverence in his gaze. For a fleeting moment, he and Sabrina were united in pure, unadulterated joy. In the hours following the birth, mother and child were monitored closely. Sabrina's exhaustion finally gave way to a wave of sleep. Daniel cradled the baby in his arms, promising her a better man than he had been. He whispered apologies. She wouldn't understand vows he hoped he could keep. Time stood still in that quiet moment, father and daughter illuminated by the hospital room's soft overhead light. When Sabrina woke later, she found Daniel seated in a chair, the baby swaddled securely against his chest. She watched them for a moment, her emotions churning. He looked like a man reborn. Tears dried on his cheeks, eyes wide with wonder. But the memory of his betrayal still lingered like a scar. She couldn't simply pretend it never happened. Daniel sensed her gaze and looked up. "Do you want to hold her?" he asked softly. Sabrina nodded, and Daniel carefully transferred the baby into her arms. Their daughter yawned, tiny lips pursing in a content expression. Sabrina's heart clenched with a fierce, protective love, not just for the baby, but for the future. She wanted to protect Daniel. She began quietly. "This changes things. Not us, necessarily, but my priorities. Our daughter comes first above everything. I don't know if I can ever trust you the way I did before, but I won't deny her a father. If you want to be in her life, prove it. Show up for her. Be the man she deserves." He bowed his head, tears threatening to spill again. "I will, whatever it takes." Over the next few days, Sabrina remained in the hospital for observation, experiencing the normal bouts of postpartum vulnerability. Nurses taught her techniques for feeding and swaddling, and Daniel took copious notes, determined to be a hands-on father. There were awkward silences between them, remnants of distrust and unspoken hurt, yet there was also a glimmer of something new, a tentative hope that maybe through their daughter they could forge a different path. When Sabrina was discharged, they returned to the penthouse, now carefully reconfigured, with a nursery filled with cradle and crown pieces Sabrina had personally selected, no vestige of Clarissa's involvement in sight. The baby's name, Charlotte, was embroidered on a plush blanket. As Sabrina laid Charlotte in her crib for the first time, Daniel hovered protectively, ensuring she was comfortable. Sabrina glanced at him, recalling the day she'd discovered his deception. "In that very brand of crib store, I bought Cradle and Crown, because I refused to let you and Clarissa tarnish what should be ours," she said almost to herself. "This is our daughter's world now, and if you want to be part of it, you'll follow my lead." He replied quietly, "I understand, and I'm sorry for everything." She gave a small nod, acknowledging his words without offering absolution. Forgiveness was a process, not a one-time event. For now, their truce was a fragile one, carefully balanced on the promise of a better tomorrow for Charlotte. And so began the next chapter of their lives, one marked by 3 a.m. Feedings, diaper, changes, baby coos, and the slow rebuilding of trust in the shadow of betrayal. Whether Daniel and Sabrina would one day return to the love they once knew remained uncertain, but with Charlotte as their anchor, they faced the future, determined to give her all the love and security she deserved, forging a new kind of family in the aftermath of a very public scandal. In the end, Daniel and Sabrina's story reminds us that betrayals can happen in even the most glamorous circles. But so can strength and resilience. Sabrina bought an entire baby brand, not just to make a statement, but to secure her child's future. Daniel faced a crushing fall from grace, yet found a glimmer of hope in fatherhood. Their journey isn't a fairy tale ending, but a testament to the power of facing our darkest truths and choosing to move forward one step at a time. A swirl of frost-laced wind hits Daniel's face the moment he steps out of his car, black coattails flapping against the flurry of snow. The Winter Ball has been the most anticipated event of the year, a glittering palace of music, rich wines, and elite company. But for Daniel, it's another stark reminder that he's walking in alone. He steels himself determined not to let memories of the past taint his evening. Then across the ballroom's grand foyer, he catches sight of her Eleanor, his ex-wife. She isn't alone. She's holding the hands of 4 children who each carry the exact color and shape of his own eyes. The Winter Ball took place in the heart of Manhattan at the luxurious Plaza Hotel near Central Park. Crisp December air clung to Daniel White's every breath as he made his way past doormen who greeted him with polite nods. The swirling lights of the city reflected on the fresh snowfall, granting an almost fairy tale aura to the evening. Inside, the hotel's lobby dazzled with poinsettias, golden wreaths, and artful Christmas trees. The florid notes of a string quartet wafted through the corridor, luring him toward the grand ballroom. Daniel, 37 years old, had always been considered dashing. Tall with a chiseled jaw and haunted green eyes, he moved with a confident grace that came less from ego and more from an innate sense of self. Yet tonight, an uninvited pang of loneliness gripped his heart. Attending the ball alone was never his plan. Just a year ago, he had imagined standing here with his wife Elena on his arm, both of them in elegantly tailored outfits, exchanging polite smiles with Manhattan's elite, forging connections for their philanthropic endeavors. But life had taken a brutal turn. He and Elena parted ways under painful circumstances that still felt raw. Despite the veneer of normalcy, he attempted to wear Tom Ford suit perfectly, knotted tie, polished demeanor. Daniel felt like an open wound in the midst of a glittering crowd. Every decoration, every swirl of laughter, every passing perfume reminded him of the life he had lost. He tried to distract himself by thinking of small talk about his work at Harrington and White Investments, about the latest Wall Street Journal headlines about the real estate deals the firm had lined up. He thought of the people he might meet tonight. Potential clients, old friends, distant acquaintances like Teresa Wilson from his days at Yale, and donors who might support his cherished cause, the foundation he'd created in honor of his late father to fund scholarships for underprivileged kids. The grand double doors to the ballroom stood open, revealing a dazzling space, sparkling chandeliers, marble floors, and swirling couples in formal attire. As Daniel stepped across the threshold, he felt both an unsettling excitement and a sense of dread. Somewhere in this crowd, there could be a face from the past. Elena's face, perhaps, but in the swirl of suits and gowns, he couldn't immediately see her. He exhaled slowly, reminding himself that this evening was meant to be a fresh start, or at least a test of his ability to move on. After all, Elena had carved her own path, seemingly uninterested in the shared dreams they'd once built. He clenched his fists in his pockets. This night is for me, he thought. I'm going to enjoy myself, come what may. Daniel's mind drifted back to the day he first met Eleanor. It was during a summer internship at a hedge fund in Boston, back when they were both wide-eyed graduate students. She was bold, brilliant, and carried an aura of mystery that captivated him. Elena's luscious dark hair framed her olive complexion, and her deep brown eyes flashed with ambition. She had come from a modest background in Montreux, Switzerland, and her accent, along with her fierce determination, made her stand out among the crowd of interns. Their attraction was instant, fueled by late-night strategy sessions and stolen glances at coffee breaks. By the end of the internship, they'd begun a relationship that seemed as bright and promising as their future careers. Within 2 years after they'd finished graduate school, he at Yale, She at Columbia, they married in a private ceremony, officiated at a small chapel in upstate New York. His mother, Carol White, and her father, André de la Montagne, blessed the union with tears of joy. Yet as they built their careers, cracks began to form. Both were ambitious. Both wanted the best for themselves, and ironically, that drive which once unified them started to push them apart. Eleanor felt stifled by the conventional life Daniel seemed to desire, a suburban home, dinner parties, early nights. Meanwhile, Daniel struggled to keep up with Eleanor's relentless push for success and adventure. She took job opportunities in Hong Kong and Zurich, while Daniel remained in New York to care for his ailing father and to stabilize his fledgling investment firm, Harrington and White, which he co-founded with his best friend from college, James Harrington. Long, silent months apart replaced the passion they once shared. Emails and texts became the main medium of communication. The final blow came when his father passed away, and Elena didn't show up to the funeral. She was stuck in a negotiation in Shanghai, or so she claimed. Daniel never forgave her for that. The day after the funeral, he filed for divorce. The year since the divorce was granted felt like a haze of regrets and half-hearted attempts to move forward. Daniel's mother tried to console him. James Harrington tried to bury him in work, hoping he'd forget his heartbreak in corporate success. But the hurt ran deep. He wasn't just losing Elena. He was losing the idea of the family he had so desperately wanted to build, the stability he had vowed to create, a vow that was broken. Little did he know that this fateful night at the winter ball would unravel secrets that would cut deeper than he ever imagined. A month ago, Daniel had almost declined the invitation to the winter ball. The event, hosted annually by New York's philanthropic circle, was a magnet for the richest and most influential personalities. It was a chance to mingle, to raise money for various causes, and to flash power and status. Harrington and White had been a chief sponsor for the past 3 years. Daniel James Harrington had told him, "We can't skip it. Our firm's entire public relations campaign is anchored on us being present front and center. This is how we attract high-profile clients." Daniel, sitting behind his mahogany desk, stared at the invitation's gold-trimmed edges. The bold lettering read, "Winter Ball, an evening of giving and glamour." He sighed. "I just don't feel up to it, James." His partner, a tall man with sandy hair and an unrelenting optimism, placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Look, I know you've been through a rough patch, but it's time to step out there again. If you don't, you'll never move on." Daniel had half a mind to crumple the invitation. Memories of attending this event with Eleanor the previous year, dressed in matching midnight blue ensembles, dancing under the chandelier, celebrating the expansion of their philanthropic network, still haunted him. Back then, the final stage of divorce was looming, even if they pretended all was well in front of the cameras. But James had a point. Daniel's philanthropic foundation needed exposure, and the firm needed him to show that he was still the confident leader they all relied on. Perhaps the winter ball could mark a turning point, a chance to re-enter society with his head held high. After all, what were the odds Elena would be there? She'd been traveling the world, seemingly unconcerned with the philanthropic circuit in New York. Reluctantly, he wrote out his acceptance, sealed the envelope, and sent it back. The next day, he forwarded his measurements to his tailor for a new suit, an outward sign that he intended to move forward, even if his heart still lagged behind. The clink of champagne glasses and the resonant echoes of string instruments filled the grand ballroom. Women in sweeping satin gowns floated on the arms of men in crisp tuxedos. A faint scent of pine from the holiday decorations mixed with the sweet aroma of desserts placed at the buffet table. Daniel tried to relax by the refreshment station, swirling a glass of sparkling water. He was never one for too much alcohol, especially not when he needed to keep his wits about him. Around him, clusters of socialites murmured gossip and speculation. Teresa Wilson, a college acquaintance now working for the New York Times, offered him a polite nod from across the room. He returned the gesture, but avoided prolonged eye contact, not in the mood for an in-depth conversation. His eyes scanned the dancing couples, the swirl of color and elegance. Usually he'd find it all mesmerizing. The soft glow of chandeliers overhead, the confident laugh of donors proud to share their wealth, the swirl of philanthropic ambition that actually did some good in the world. But tonight, an uneasy tension weighed on him. Something about the air felt thick, as though the energy in the room was brimming with revelations waiting to be spilled. He stepped away from the crowd, weaving through elegantly dressed men and women. A group of corporate bankers from Goldman Sachs tried to engage him in talk about the stock market's recent fluctuations. Another small cluster from a tech startup pitched their new app. He feigned interest, made a few polite remarks, but found himself inching toward the corner of the room where a sense of quiet serenity reigned, just as he took a seat at a small table beside a pillar draped in silver garlands. His gaze drifted over the dance floor and froze. The murmuring crowd seemed to blur. The music dulled, as if his senses had zeroed in on a single figure. There, standing at the top of the ballroom's ornate staircase, was Elena. She wore a wine-red gown that accentuated her lithe form, her dark hair cascading in loose waves over her shoulders. A hush seemed to envelop him, like a wind had swept through his chest. After all these months, it still felt unreal to see her in person. It wasn't just Elena's presence that paralyzed him. At her sides stood 4 small figures. Children. 2 girls and 2 boys, each no older than 5 or 6. And in the gleam of the chandelier's light, Daniel noticed the most striking detail. Each child's eyes were the same luminous green as his own. His mind reeled. This had to be some sort of trick of the light. It couldn't be. But as Elena stepped forward, guiding them gently down the staircase, the resemblance became even clearer. 4 children with the same color and shape of eyes as Daniel White. A jolt of disbelief electrified his veins. He'd never heard Elena mention children after they split. He hadn't heard a whisper from mutual acquaintances. And now, out of nowhere, these 4 kids appeared, each bearing his most distinctive feature. The glass in his hand trembled. The lively chatter of the ball receded to a low hum. All he could do was watch, transfixed, as Elena and those children moved further into the throng of people, heading unerringly in his direction. Daniel rose slowly, heart pounding. If Elena saw him, she gave no outward sign. She turned to exchange pleasantries with a member of the philanthropic committee, her polite smile carefully in place. The children clung to her hands, one of the little girls glancing shyly around the room. Up close, the resemblance was even more impossible to deny. Each child had inherited the green eyes that were so distinctive in Daniel's family. Each had some subtle aspect of his facial structure, a dimple on the cheek, the angular tilt of the jaw, the gentle curve of the nose. He approached his steps, halting uncertain how to break the barrier of polite society that kept them separated. A swirl of dancers momentarily blocked his path. By the time he emerged into an opening, Eleanor was there, mere feet away, her expression unreadable. "Hello, Daniel," she said quietly. Even amidst the swirl of music and conversation, her voice carried to him, as though they were the only 2 people in the room. Her accent seemed a touch more pronounced than usual, Or perhaps he was just hyper-aware of every detail in this moment. He swallowed, noticing the children shift uncomfortably behind her. "Elena," he managed, forcing out the word. Another breath. "I didn't know you'd be here." Her eyes flickered. The invitation came through an old contact. And, well, I wanted to support the cause. Also, I thought it might be time. Time, he repeated. He let the word linger, casting a glance at the children, who were now standing awkwardly, clearly unsure of what was happening between the grown-ups. Time for what? She hesitated, and her gaze fell to the floor. Then, drawing in a soft breath, she said, "Time for you to meet someone." Turning, she placed a gentle hand on each child's shoulder. "Mon chéri," she whispered to the boy on her right. "This is Daniel. He's an old friend of mine." Daniel's heart twisted. Just an old friend. The boy looked up, wide-eyed, and offered a polite greeting. The rest followed suit, each voice small but distinct. 2 girls, 2 boys all in a line. His mind whirled. He couldn't form the words to ask the burning question, the question that screamed for an answer. Instead, he forced a cordial smile. "How do you do?" "We're fine," replied the eldest boy, whose hair was chestnut, just like Daniel's was as a child. "My name's Sebastian." The others introduced themselves, Madeline, Florence, and Thomas. The mention of their names hammered in the reality of their existence. Daniel extended his hand tentatively, and each child shook it with a curious, polite manner that seemed unusual for their ages. At last he turned to Elena with an expression that must have pleaded for some kind of explanation. She read it clearly. "Daniel," she said in a low tone, "I didn't plan on bringing them here to shock you. But I thought maybe this was the right time to tell you the truth." A tumult of anger, confusion, and heartbreak welled up in him. He glanced around, mindful of the many guests who might be watching. "Perhaps we should talk somewhere private." She nodded. "Yes, let's go to the side lounge. The children can stay with my nanny for a moment." She turned and beckoned a woman standing discreetly by the door, who hurried over and led the children away. A dull roar filled Daniel's ears as he and Elena glided along the perimeter of the ballroom. Guests parted to let them pass, and in their curious eyes, Daniel caught glimmers of speculation. Once they reached the smaller adjacent lounge, an ornate room with plush armchairs and soft lighting, they stepped inside and shut the door. The silence in the lounge was suffocating. Elena stood by a fireplace, golden light flickering against her dress. Daniel remained near the door, as though unsure whether to enter fully or bolt. Finally, she motioned him closer. His voice, when it emerged, trembled with barely contained emotion. Are they mine?" Elena studied him, eyes glistening. "Yes," she said, softly. "They are your children." The words struck Daniel like a physical blow. He staggered backward, pressing a hand against the door for support. For a moment it felt as though the world had inverted. The walls closed in his breath, caught in his chest. He tried to reconcile the reality of what he'd just heard with the life he'd been living alone. Believing fatherhood was a dream that died when his marriage ended. How? Why? He struggled for coherent words. A dozen questions fought for priority in his mind. Why wouldn't you tell me? Why 4 children? Elena. Tears welled in her eyes, and she clasped her hands together, the diamond bracelet on her wrist glinting in the firelight. It's complicated, Daniel. I was pregnant when the divorce became final. I discovered I was carrying twins at first. But there was more to it. It was a complicated pregnancy that I had to keep under the care of a specialized clinic in Geneva. She paused, swallowing hard. I couldn't bring myself to tell you. We were both so angry, so hurt. And after the funeral of your father, I felt like there was no place for me in your life. No place for my burdens. Burdens, he snapped, voice rising. They're children, Eleanor. Our children. You denied me the chance to be a father. She flinched. I know. I was selfish. I was scared. My father convinced me it might be better this way. He wanted me back in Switzerland, away from the complexities of our relationship. A pounding ache built behind Daniel's eyes, half fury, half heartbreak. He remembered Elena's father, André de la Montagne, proud, aristocratic, always disapproving of Daniel's American roots, but 4 of them. Elena, how old are they? She let out a trembling sigh. Sebastian and Madeline are 6. Florence and Thomas are 5. Yes, I was already pregnant once before the divorce process, and it was a complicated timeline. I found out I was expecting Florence and Thomas much later. The pregnancies were nearly back-to-back. I kept it hidden under the chaos of traveling, and I found ways to manage without letting you know. Daniel closed his eyes. Waves of disbelief washing over him. For all this time, you never once sent me a clue. Never told me you'd had them. Tears slipped down Eleanor's cheeks. I wanted to multiple times, but each time I gathered the courage, something stopped me. Your mother's health issues, the business expansions, and your anger. We left things so bitterly. I thought I could protect the children by keeping them away from a toxic environment. She shook her head. I see now. That was a mistake. Mistake. He barked a humorless laugh. It's so much more than that. Elena, you've robbed me of 6 years of fatherhood. I could have known them, raised them. She lowered her head. I'll never be able to make that up to you or to them, but I can try to fix it now if you'll let me. Daniel sank into an armchair, his limbs numb. This revelation turned his world inside out. For so long he'd thought fatherhood was an unreachable horizon, especially after the divorce. Now he had children, 4 living, breathing children who bore his eyes, his features, his lineage. He wanted to hate Eleanor, to rage at her for this injustice. But a quiet voice in his heart reminded him of how he'd once loved her, how complicated their parting had been. You should have told me, he whispered, pressing his palms to his eyes. I would have been there, no matter what was going on between us. That's a choice you made for both of us, and it wasn't yours to make alone. Elena knelt before him, voice quivering. I know. I'm sorry, Daniel. Please let's talk about how to move forward for the children's sake, if nothing else. He looked at her, seeing the raw fear and regret. In the space of a single evening, everything had changed, and he had no idea how to proceed in a way that would heal 6 years of damage. Overcome by the shock of Eleanor's confession, Daniel found his mind spiraling back in time. He remembered the bitter arguments that had led to their divorce, how his father's terminal illness put pressure on him to stay in New York, how Eliana, with her unstoppable career drive, had accepted an offer in Shanghai, simultaneously bristling at Daniel's pleas for her to return. He recalled the day he discovered the plane tickets she'd booked not just for business, but for a possible permanent move overseas. The day he confronted her, they both said things they could never take back. You'll never be satisfied with who I am, he'd accused. You don't want a partner, you want a trophy wife. She retorted, eyes blazing. They parted ways, each convinced the other was irredeemable, and in the swirl of attorneys and court proceedings, each attempted to carve out a future free from the other's disappointment. When the divorce finalized, Daniel had felt strangely numb, as if a piece of him had died. He sought solace in building Harrington and White into a powerhouse, throwing himself into philanthropic work, perhaps to fill the void left by the breakdown of his personal life. Now discovering Elena had been pregnant at the time, or just shortly thereafter, turned all his assumptions into lies. He remembered every phone call they missed, every email they'd let go unanswered. They had been so consumed by pride that neither had paused to consider the bigger picture that there might be unborn children deserving of unity and love. In the quiet lounge, Elena was still kneeling by his chair, eyes rimmed with tears. The faint sound of the Winter Ball's orchestra drifted in from beyond the door, an incongruous soundtrack to their shattering revelation. He said softly, "I need to know everything, Elena. No more secrets?" She nodded, standing and moving to the window where she looked out over the city lights. "I found out I was pregnant with Sebastian and Madeline about 4 months before we filed for divorce. But we were in the midst of the biggest fight of our lives. I was traveling for work. I felt alone, and my father persuaded me to stay quiet until I could come home to Switzerland. He never liked you, Daniel, and he wanted me to raise the children by myself." She turned to him, voice trembling. But then I realized I was expecting again Florence and Thomas shortly after the birth of the twins. The pregnancies were a medical miracle and complication. The doctors told me the second was an unusual overlapping pregnancy, extremely rare. I was terrified. I didn't know if I'd survive. There were complications. I was hospitalized for months in Geneva. During that time, my father kept everything hidden from the outside world. I was too weak to fight him. Daniel listened, each word burning into his soul. He envisioned Elena alone in a Swiss clinic battling a perilous pregnancy, while he, thousands of miles away, cursed her name for not being present in his life. A complicated swirl of sorrow, pity, and anger gripped him. And after the births, you just never thought it important enough to pick up the phone. Her eyes flashed with regret. I was scared. I was told you'd moved on, that you resented me. And in truth, I was ashamed for deceiving you. Yes, I let pride and fear dictate my actions. I thought maybe if I raised them alone, I could avoid all that heartbreak, all that anger. But it's been a burden on my conscience, especially as the children have grown and started asking questions about their father. Daniel closed his eyes, taking a moment to let her words settle. He pictured 4 children in a Swiss estate, asking, "Where's Daddy?" and receiving no real answers. The heartbreak coiled tighter in his chest. With trembling conviction, he rose to his feet. "I have to meet them properly. They need to know who I am." Elena moved to open the door. "Of course. They're just next door with the nanny. Let's go." Stepping into the side corridor, Daniel felt the warm overhead lights shining down on him with an almost glaring intensity. The sweet, festive music in the background felt surreal. He was about to meet his children for the first time in the midst of a glittering winter ball. In a small antechamber, the 4 children sat in a circle with their nanny, a petite woman named Dominique, who was reading them a story to keep them occupied. As soon as Elena and Daniel entered, the children looked up, their wide green eyes fixed on Daniel. Madeline, the older girl, peered at him with curiosity. "You look like me," she said quietly, as if discovering something extraordinary. Daniel knelt, feeling tears prick at his eyes. "I guess we do look alike," he replied. Sebastian, the older boy, placed his hands on his hips with a surprising note of confidence. "Maman says You're very important in New York. Are you a prince or something?" Daniel couldn't help a small smile. "No, I'm not a prince. I just help run a company. And I do some work helping others." Florence, a shy girl, nestled closer to her nanny. "Are you a good man?" she asked, her voice small. The question speared Daniel's heart. He glanced at Elena, who was silently watching, tears shimmering on her lashes. Carefully he answered, "I try to be. I'm not always perfect, but I do my best." Thomas, the youngest, touched Daniel's tie. "I like your tie," he said, smiling. Elena knelt beside Daniel, resting a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Kids, I want you to know that Daniel is someone very important to me, and to you." She paused, her gaze flickering to Daniel. "He's your father." The words settled over the room. There was no thunderous reaction, no immediate meltdown, but rather a kind of hushed awe. Madeline was the first to speak again. "That means you love us." Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. "More than I can say. Even though we're just meeting, I already feel that you're the most precious gift I could have." Sebastian studied Daniel with a pensive look. "Then why didn't you come see us before?" A flash of guilt twisted inside Daniel, though the fault wasn't truly his. But how could he explain that? He glanced at Elena, who placed a gentle hand on Sebastian's shoulder. "That's my fault," she said. "I didn't tell him where we were. Sometimes adults make mistakes." Her admission left the children quiet. They seemed to accept it with a resilience that only children possess. Slowly, Thomas reached up and touched Daniel's hair, as if to confirm he was real. Daniel felt his heart break and mend all at once. He opened his arms hesitantly, offering an embrace. One by one, the children stepped forward. Madeline first, then Sebastian, then the others. Their small arms wrapped around him, and for a moment he closed his eyes, letting the warmth of their presence wash over him. He didn't notice the tall figure standing in the corridor until someone cleared his throat. Daniel looked up to see James Harrington, his business partner and longtime friend, wearing an expression of utter shock. Daniel James said, struggling for composure, I've been looking for you, but I see you're preoccupied." His eyes roved over the 4 children. "Are these?" Daniel nodded, still holding on to the children. "Yes." "Mine." James stood there, mouth slightly open. But he rallied quickly, offering a small, congratulatory nod. "I see. Well, I'll leave you to your reunion." He turned to go, then paused, giving Daniel a pointed look that seemed to say, "We need to talk." Daniel knew with a sinking feeling that his entire life, personal and professional, had just undergone a seismic shift. Everything from finances to living arrangements to his carefully curated public image would change once it became public knowledge that he had 4 children he'd never mentioned. And in his mind, he couldn't help wondering if more secrets were lurking behind Elena's sudden reappearance. Later that evening, after ensuring the children were settled in a quiet corner, with Dominique, Danielle, and Elena slipped away to find more privacy. They went up a short flight of stairs, ending up on a balcony overlooking the ballroom floor. Below them, the party continued in full swing, glittering gowns, twinkling lights, the hum of polite conversation. He stared down at the swirling crowd, then turned to Elena. "This is a lot to take in, Elena. Are you certain no uncertainties about their paternity?" She flinched at the question. "They're yours, Daniel. I swear it on everything I hold dear." His face softened. "I want to believe you." But you have to understand my perspective. You hid them from me for 6 years. Her cheeks turned pink. I understand. If you want a paternity test, I won't stop you. Anything to give you peace of mind. He nodded, feeling a pang of guilt for doubting her. I'm sorry. It's just, this is so unexpected. She waved off the apology with a trembling hand. I deserve your suspicion, but I have no reason to lie now. My father, he urged me to cut you out of our lives entirely. He was never going to let you know about them. But they kept asking. They wanted to know why they didn't have a daddy like other children. And as they grew older, their resemblance to you grew more obvious. A wave of anger coursed through Daniel. Your father, he's the one who convinced you to hide them from me. She shook her head. I let him. I was emotionally weak, recovering from the pregnancies far from home. I can't blame him entirely. The mention of André de la Montagne sparked an old resentment in Daniel. Elena's father had never hidden his contempt for Daniel's lack of noble pedigree and the American approach to business. But to manipulate a situation, this profoundly was beyond cruel. You realize this is going to change everything, Daniel said. I need to speak to a lawyer, figure out custody financial arrangements. And the children, how do we help them adjust? Elena's face showed weariness, but also relief that Daniel was taking responsibility instead of pushing them away. I've already spoken to a lawyer about my return to the States. I'm prepared to stay in New York if that's what it takes. He eyed her wary. And your job? She sighed. I stepped back from my international projects. Right now, I'm focusing on philanthropic work. My father doesn't approve, but that doesn't matter anymore. My priority is the children. Daniel let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He recalled how they once dreamed of having children, raising them in a home full of love and mutual respect. That dream had crumbled. Now faced with reality, they had to figure out how to pick up the pieces and build something stable for 4 innocent lives. How do we start? He asked softly. Elena's lips curved into a sad smile. Perhaps by letting them know we both love them, that we're both here for them. Everything else can come later. For tonight, let's just be there for them. As the evening wore on, Daniel felt guilt creeping in. The 4 children, his children, were clearly bewildered by this sudden introduction. While they bravely tried to interact with Daniel, he sensed their uncertainty. After all, in their young minds, he was a stranger who happened to share their eyes, face shape, and last name. He tried to be jovial with them, kneeling to their level, listening to their half-formed stories about Switzerland, about their school, about the snow-capped mountains they missed. But inside, he was consumed by a swirl of emotions. He'd missed their first steps, first words, birthdays, 6 years of precious moments. And then came another jolt. During a lull, Madeline quietly asked, "Is Hans coming too?" Daniel glanced at Elena. Confusion etched on his face. Elena's expression stiffened. "We'll talk about that later, sweetheart," she said hastily. Hands Daniel pressed. Elena hesitated, then cleared her throat. I've been seeing someone, a colleague from work. It's not serious, but the children know him. He was around as a friend. A sharp pang of jealousy, anger, and betrayal shot through Daniel. That was only natural. Eleanor was no longer his wife, and she had every right to date. But the thought that another man had been a figure in his children's lives, even if just tangentially, set his teeth on edge. He fought to keep his voice calm. "So he's been around the children," Elena nodded, looking away. "They like him, Daniel. He's been kind to them. Daniel swallowed the bitterness rising in his throat. I see, Sebastian piped up. Hans takes us sledding. He helped me make a birdhouse once. The image of another man, stepping into fatherly roles, stung Daniel deeply. Yet he forced a polite nod. That's nice of him. Elena quickly changed the subject, offering the children a plate of mini pastries from a passing waiter. But Daniel's thoughts lingered on Hans. He wondered if Hans had become a paternal figure, if the children would look to him instead of Daniel. By the time the ball was winding down, Daniel had endured the well-meaning small talk of acquaintances who admired the adorable children, asking whose they were. He offered vague smiles and quick answers, uncertain how to handle such personal inquiries. Outside, the snowfall had intensified, blanketing the city in white. Daniel stood with the children under the glowing street lamps, waiting as a valet brought around 2 cars. He felt an unspoken tension with Elena by his side. They were 2 estranged individuals, forced back together by the existence of these 4 precious lives. Where are you staying tonight? He asked her. At the Ritz, for now, she replied. I didn't know how you'd react, so I didn't make longer-term arrangements. He nodded. That's fine. Look, tomorrow I'd like to spend more time with them. Can we arrange that? Elena studied him, relief softening her features. Of course. They need to know their father. Daniel forced a tiny smile at the word father, still grappling with the weight of it. Then, as the children climbed into the waiting SUV, Daniel laid a gentle hand on Elena's arm. Thank you for telling me, even if it's late. She gave him a somber nod. And I'm sorry. In the hush of the swirling snow, Daniel watched as the vehicle pulled away. He stood there a long time, staring into the winter night, silently vowing that whatever happened next, he wouldn't abandon those children. No matter how painful the transition, they were his, and he was theirs. The following morning, Daniel woke in his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. Sleep had eluded him for much of the night visions of 4 bright-eyed faces populating his restless dreams. He rose early, brewing a pot of strong coffee as he mulled over the next step. He called his mother Carol White, who lived in a quiet suburb in Connecticut. It was time she heard the news. When he told her she had 4 grandchildren, the coffee mug almost slipped from his hand as he heard her reaction. First she stammered in disbelief, then sobbed, then erupted in joy mingled with confusion and a tinge of anger at Eleanor's secrecy. Despite everything, Carol couldn't wait to meet them. Daniel also placed a call to James Harrington, who demanded an explanation. They arranged to meet in the Harrington and White boardroom that afternoon, once Daniel had a chance to visit with his newly discovered family. A text beeped on Daniel's phone just as he stepped into the hallway. Elena. We're at the Central Park Zoo with the kids. Meet us here if you can. Daniel hurried to dress, donning a casual sweater and coat. The crisp winter air bit at his cheeks as he strode down the block, weaving past holiday shoppers and carriage horses. The sense of surreal anticipation made his heart pound. At the zoo's entrance, he found Elena and the children watching seals swim in a large tank. The children spotted him first, waving excitedly. His chest warmed at their enthusiasm. He approached with a smile. Hey guys, Sebastian grabbed his hand. Look at the seals, Papa. The casual use of Papa startled Daniel, but he squeezed the boy's hand in response, a lump forming in his throat. Elena noticed his reaction. They adapt quickly, she murmured, eyes bright with unshed tears. They strolled along, admiring the polar bears and penguins, occasionally stopping to buy hot cocoa. Daniel tried to soak in every detail how Madeline tugged on his sleeve to show him her favorite animals. How Thomas giggled when the penguins waddled, how Florence shyly stuck close to Elena, how Sebastian asked a million questions about everything. They were a family moving in a loose cluster, forging a tender sense of unity. Yet Daniel couldn't help noticing a shadow in Elena's gaze, as if she were keeping another secret. After a while, Sebastian raced ahead. "Papa, there's an ice sculpture over there." Elena and Daniel lagged behind, exchanging a look. "They're incredible," Daniel remarked. "Smart curious. I'm amazed at how they each have their own personality." Elena smiled. "You would have made a wonderful father, Daniel." He regarded her intently. "Is there anything else you haven't told me? Because right now I need the truth. Everything." She sighed, glancing away. "There is something else, but I wasn't sure how to bring it up. It's about Thomas. He's had some health issues since he was born prematurely." Alarm raced through Daniel. "Health issues? Is he okay?" "He's mostly fine," Elena said quickly. "But he has a minor heart condition. The doctors say it's manageable with medication and monitoring. He might need surgery in the future, but there's a good chance he won't." Daniel's face paled. "My God, Elena, you should have told me. I'd have been there for him." She placed a hand on his arm. "I know. This is what I regret most. I'm ready to set things right now. I've brought them here so we can live in New York for a while, see specialists if needed, and ensure he gets the best care. I'll bear any cost if you want." Daniel's response was immediate. "No. We'll share it. He's my son, our son. I'll do whatever it takes to help him." Emotions swarmed in Eleanor's eyes. Relief mingled with sorrow. "Thank you." Their conversation was cut short by the children's excited calls. They hurried over, trying to smile and laugh as if everything was normal. But for Daniel, each moment with the children was a reminder of what he'd missed and of the challenges to come. After the zoo, they decided to warm up at a nearby cafe, a cozy establishment known for its artisan pastries. The children devoured mini croissants while Elena sipped a cappuccino, and Daniel hovered protectively, noticing every detail about his new family members. Between bites of pastry, Florence hesitantly asked Papa, "Do you have a nice house?" Daniel chuckled softly. "I have an apartment. It's big enough for all of you if you ever want to visit." Madeline's face lit up. "Can we see it?" Eleanor shot Daniel a questioning glance. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" He took a moment before nodding. "Yes. I'd like them to see where I live. I have a spare room that can be turned into something for them." So it was decided. They gathered their things and took a quick taxi ride to Daniel's penthouse overlooking Central Park. The building's doorman, Mr. Bartholomew, nearly dropped his cap upon seeing Daniel leading 4 children by the hand. "Elena. Kids?" "This is home," Daniel said, opening his front door. The foyer was sleek and modern, perhaps too sterile for children's tastes. Sebastian's eyes widened at the floor-to-ceiling windows, while Madeline squealed with delight at the view of the snowy treetops and distant skyscrapers. They spread out, exploring. Elena followed them, pointing out paintings and artifacts Daniel had collected. Her gaze stopped on a photo of Daniel's parents. "Your mother will be ecstatic," she said. "She's already invited all of you to spend Christmas in Connecticut," Daniel replied. A flicker of fear touched Elena's face. "It might be overwhelming to meet your entire family so soon." He shrugged gently. "They're the children's family too, Elena. We can take it slow. I just want them to feel welcomed." She nodded, watching Thomas run giggling across the living room's polished floor. They deserve a big family Christmas. They've never really had that. A warm feeling grew in Daniel's chest. Maybe despite the heartbreak, they could form a family dynamic, if not as husband and wife, then at least as coring co-parents. Suddenly, Eleanor's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her face paling. She excused herself, stepping into the hallway. Daniel lingered, an uneasy feeling creeping over him. A few minutes later, Elena returned, face ashen. "What's wrong?" he asked. "It's Hans," she said, voice tight. "He's in New York. He wants to see me and the children." Daniel felt a sudden wave of protectiveness, almost territorial. He has no claim on them. "I'm their father." Eleanor placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's not that simple. The kids know him. They care for him." "But I'm here now," Daniel insisted, trying to quell the anger. "I won't just stand by while some stranger plays father." She looked torn. "I understand. I'll talk to him. Just, please don't make this more complicated than it has to be." Daniel exhaled, controlling his temper. "Fine. But I want to be present for any meeting. The children need stability, not confusion." Elena nodded, and the tension in her shoulders seemed to ease. But the mere prospect of Hans stepping into the picture threatened to upend the fragile dynamic Daniel and Elena were beginning to forge. Over the next few days, Daniel spent every spare moment with his children. He took them to the Museum of Natural History, where they marveled at dinosaur skeletons and celestial exhibits. He showed them Rockefeller Center's towering Christmas tree, letting them watch the ice skaters gliding beneath twinkling lights. Those days were some of the happiest Daniel had experienced in a long time, yet a lingering worry about Hans hovered in the back of his mind. Would Hans try to disrupt his reconnection with the children? One afternoon, while Elena and the children were napping in their suite at the Ritz, Daniel went to his office to meet James Harrington. Sitting in the sleek boardroom with glass walls overlooking Manhattan, Daniel braced for James's barrage of questions, so James began leaning forward. 4 kids. "Daniel, you have no idea the shockwaves this is causing among our investors and clients. They're all calling me asking if there's some scandal or if we've been hiding something." Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. "I didn't know, James. Believe me, this was as much a surprise to me as it was to the world." James studied him intently. "Do you believe Elena's story?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes. She's done a DNA test already. Or at least she's offered it. I believe her. They have my eyes, for God's sake." James exhaled. "All right. So how are we handling this from a PR standpoint?" Daniel thought for a moment. "We release a brief statement saying I've recently become aware of my children, that I intend to fulfill all my responsibilities as a father, and that the details remain private. That should suffice. I don't want to exploit my kids' private lives." James agreed. "But be aware the media might spin it. Elena was high profile in the finance world too. They'll probably dig up old dirt." Daniel nodded, crossing his arms. "Let them dig. I just care about the kids right now. They're my top priority." James softened, offering Daniel a supportive smile. "You've always wanted a family, man. Maybe this is your chance. Just be careful with Elena. She's unpredictable." Daniel gave a mirthless chuckle. "Trust me, I know." After the meeting, Daniel returned to the Ritz, a sense of determination fueling him. He wanted to talk to Elena about officially moving back to the US with the children. But when he arrived, he found her in tears in the lounge. She looked up, eyes puffy. "Hans." He confronted me. He demanded to see the children. He's threatening legal action, claiming he's acted as a de facto parent. Daniel's blood ran cold. He has no legal claim. He's not their father. Elena sniffed, wiping her cheeks. He's not listed on any birth certificates, of course, but he's threatening to tell the tabloids about everything about how I hid the children from you, about the details of our finances. He wants money, Daniel. Daniel ground his teeth. So he's blackmailing you. She nodded miserably. I broke things off with him as soon as I decided to come to New York. He didn't take it well. Now he's furious. Rage coursed through Daniel, but he forced himself to remain calm. We'll handle it. I'll talk to my lawyers, and we'll put a stop to his threats. The children won't be used as pawns. Eleanor looked at him with gratitude. I'm sorry, Daniel. It seems every time you try to fix things, I bring another complication. He gently took her hand. We'll get through it. Together. For the kids. That evening, an unexpected phone call shattered the fragile calm. Hans called Daniel directly. His tone was aggressive, laced with bitterness. You think you can just waltz back into Elena's life and claim those children, Hans spat. I've been the one helping them for years. Daniel clenched his jaw. They're my children, Hans. My blood. Hans laughed harshly. Your blood, sure. But I was there when Eleanor needed help. If you had any decency, you'd let me at least see them. Daniel paused, wrestling with the primal urge to tell Hans to stay away forever. But he also recognized that the children knew Hans. Forcing them to lose him abruptly might be traumatic. We can discuss a supervised meeting, Daniel conceded. But if you try anything, any attempt at blackmail, I'll see you in court. Hans scoffed. You think your money and power can scare me? Elena's father tried that. He didn't succeed. Daniel ended the call, fury boiling in his veins. Elena, who stood nearby, watched him with anxious eyes. We'll do a supervised meeting, he told her. It might help the children's transition if they can say goodbye or set boundaries. But he's not going to threaten us anymore. She nodded, tears of relief shining. Thank you for handling this. They set the meeting for the next day in the presence of lawyers at a neutral law office. The children arrived with Elena subdued and confused. Hans was already there, face pinched with anger. When the children ran to greet him, Daniel's stomach twisted. Hans cast a smug glance Daniel's way, as if to say, see, they're mine in spirit. But Sebastian, after hugging Hans briefly, hurried to Daniel's side. Papa, are you okay? Daniel's heart soared at the simple question, the child's concern for him. I'm fine, buddy, he murmured, tousling Sebastian's hair. The negotiations that followed were tense. Hans wanted continued contact, threatening to leak scandalous information. Eleanor confessed that Hans had personal emails and financial records that could be damaging if taken out of context. Daniel's lawyer threatened Hans with a defamation suit if he went public. Finally, they reached a precarious agreement. Hans would receive a severance of sorts, a lump sum from Elena's personal funds, and would agree to no future contact with the children unless they requested it themselves once they were of age. It wasn't an ideal solution, but it would stave off immediate scandal and harassment. The children seemed unsettled as Hans gave them a final hug. Thomas clung to him for a moment, tears glistening in his eyes. Daniel's chest tightened at the sight, but he tried to remain stoic. Hans left abruptly, slamming the door behind him. Outside the office, Eleanor knelt to comfort the children, tears streaming down her cheeks. Daniel joined them, feeling the weight of these events pressing down on their small shoulders. In that moment, he promised himself he would never let them feel abandoned again. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Elena and the children moved into a rented townhouse near Daniel's apartment. Daniel spent his weekends showing them American traditions, like decorating a Christmas tree, baking cookies, and practicing English holiday carols. The day finally came for the children to meet Carol White, their grandmother in Connecticut. Despite the tension and swirling emotions, the meeting was a joyous occasion. Carol wept openly as she embraced each of her grandchildren, scolding Elena only briefly for keeping them hidden for so long. Christmas morning found them all gathered in Carol's cozy living room. Snow fell softly outside. The children squealed over presents, and Elena found herself welcomed warmly, surprisingly so, by Carol's motherly grace. Daniel, dressed in a comfy sweater, took time to reflect on how drastically his life had changed in mere weeks. He now had the family he had once dreamed about, though not in the way he'd imagined. Eleanor and Daniel still had much to resolve. Their romantic relationship remained uncertain. Old wounds and betrayals lingered, but so did a lingering thread of love. They'd begun counseling, determined to co-parent effectively. Whether or not they would reconcile as a couple remained to be seen. One late night after the children had gone to bed, Daniel and Elena sat on his penthouse balcony. The city lights twinkled below the hush of snow, making the moment feel magical. Elena leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. "Do you think we could ever be a family again?" she asked. Daniel slipped an arm around her, 1,000 thoughts flooding his mind. "I think we already are a family," he said softly. "Maybe not the conventional kind, but we'll figure it out." Elena gazed at him, a small smile curving her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving us another chance." He closed his eyes, inhaling the crisp winter air. "Thank you for letting me be a father." They sat there for a long while, listening to the distant hum of the city, their hearts brimming with the complicated, fragile hope of a new beginning. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of heartbreak, hidden children, and the fragile hope of new beginnings. Daniel's story reminds us that even through betrayal and pain, love and forgiveness can lead to unexpected miracles. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world. See you in the next story.